I have to mute myself, otherwise Brian listens to himself at the same time. Brian.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you very much. Here, everything is set up and ready. So, before, in the name of Ansible Dublin community, thank you very much for getting your time to give us a talk, even from New York.
Thank you for having me.
And
yeah, the camera so we can see everybody.
Okay, yeah, sure. And I will. I'll give the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian Coca. I work on the Ansible core team, maintaining the Ansible open source product. And we recently received version 2.0, and it has a lot of new changes and features. And we've been explaining these are the features, but we haven't explained how do they work for you, or what practical use can you do of the new things. And this is what I attempt to bring with this presentation. I expect you all are at least familiar with Ansible and hopefully have at least used version 1.9 or previous versions. This is just going to show you what the new things in 2.0 bring to the table. So first I'm going to list the interesting stuff that came out in 2.0. This does not sound very interesting, but it makes the other features possible. We revamped the core. We rewrote the core classes. Ansible had grown very organically, and there were a lot of features in a very disorganized manner, and it created a haphazard way of working, and it was really hard to maintain or even expand. So we needed to do a rewrite. And one of the things that we did in the rewrite is make sure that we could give more information and do much better syntax checking and error handling, which you'll see later examples of. We also improved the inheritance model. This is also important in the way we added features, because before, if we added a feature to a task or to a play, then we had to find the other 15 places where we needed to add it, to template it. Oh, it templates on the task, but it doesn't template on a play. It was pretty much a mess. And it also makes things a lot easier and work in many more places than they did before. Strategies. This is a new type of plugin that controls the workflow of your play. I'll give a couple of examples of the existing and the new strategy. Blocks, this plays a bit with the inheritance model, because now you can put things in blocks instead of having to repeat them all over a set of tasks, or having just to create a play to get the inheritance for the tasks. We made the task includes dynamic, which also plays into different ways of working now in 2.0. Added a couple of new directives. One of them is refresh inventory, as you see here, and the other one is delegate facts. And I'll explain these with examples later on and why are they useful for you. And we added almost 200 plugins for anything you want, anything you can think of. The list is, if you do Ansible doc -L, you'll see pages and pages of all the plugins there. The changelog has a full list. Here's also a link to the porting guide to let you know what stuff stopped working in 2.0 that kind of worked in 1.9. I'm going to show you some stuff that seemed to work in 1.9, but really didn't. And now 2.0 will give you a good error. One of the first things that we did was being a lot more informative about what the play is doing. So now with the verbose levels, you get more and more information. This is an example. One of the first things is that people were confused about which Ansible config file I was getting. So now with just one V in verbose, it'll tell you exactly which file it picked up, because it could pick up several. It could pick the one in your current working directory in your home, or the default, which is this one in the etc Ansible config. Or it could tell you, hey, I found no config file, so I'm running just with pure defaults. This is information that you sometimes need to just be able to debug your play. The header stays the same, but now, for example, we're giving you the counts of plays it found in a playbook, which I also think is pretty interesting for people to know. And tasks run. Now, this is one of my favorites. Debugging tasks, especially when you have playbooks inside playbooks or inside roles and everything else, becomes pretty onerous. Now, with a couple of verbose levels, we will give you the path to the file that contains the task and the line number of that task. So if there's a problem with a task, you can now find it very easily. Another thing that we did is give you conditions. If you look here in the output of this item, we have failed false and failed when result, because this task has a failed when and a when clause. So this is telling you it did not fail. Why? Because the failed when result is false. Before, if it failed or not, you would have to assume what the condition was. Now we tell you outright. For example, the next item fails because I have a failed when item equals 2. So now you can see that it failed, and it failed because the result, the failed when result is true. It could have failed for other reasons, and then it would say failed when result is false. So you wouldn't confuse a force failed by yourself from a failure from other sources. And the same thing with skip. I have a when item equals 3 and not equals 3. So when the item equals 3, it'll skip, and it will now give you the skip reason. The conditional check failed. And most of the other information is the same as before. But as you see, we've tried to make it as informative as possible, give you what you need, and let you control how much information you want through the verbosity levels. There's also a lot we've done with the callbacks, which are the ones that control the output, to let you customize them even more. There's a new callback shipped by default, which is called Skippy. There's a lot of people that did not want to see any skipped information. So if you use the Skippy callback as your main callback, you will not see any skipped tasks or any skipped reasons. It will just not show them. In the better error handling, we needed this because a lot of people were not seeing that they had mistakes in their plays. For example, this is a very common one. What do you expect this to do? Most people would say, oh, I would expect the command to run when both A equals B and C equals D. But that's not what was happening. A equals B got ignored because you can only have one actual key. You can only have one when. You can have multiple conditions inside of the one when, but you cannot have multiple whens. What was happening is that YAML was saying, hey, I've got a duplicate key. The second key wins, overwrites the first one. So in this case, you were only getting C equals D. So when A was not equal B, it was still running as long as C equaled D. What happens now? Now you get a nice syntax error that is telling you, look, we found something wrong. This is the actual file where it happened. The line and the column, we're not sure that it's right here, but it should be there adjacent. Because here it's telling you the error is when A equals B, which is correct, but the incorrect part is when you add the next key, when C equals D. It doesn't tell you exactly where the error is, but it's very close to exactly to where it was. It'll give you the last good line it could find and tell you, hey, the error more or less is here. This is another common mistake. People would misspell directives. 1.9 would not error out. It would just run the command every time, as if A equal B or A non-equal B. It didn't care, because it was seeing a directive it didn't know and completely ignoring it. No errors, no warnings. Now Ansible, as you see in the error before, but now it actually points you to the exact line that is an error, because it is a correct line in YAML, but it's just not a correct directive, so it's better at detecting those. And again, I think this is much improved. Your playbook will not run and do what you don't mean. It will either fail with a good message and pointing you at the correct place, or it will run and do as you mean. You won't get this ambiguous stuff that was happening in 1.9. This was another one. This looks like a good playbook, except that 1.9 was just not running the command. It was ignoring it. Why? Because it's not part of a list. It's missing the dash in front of the task. Now in 2.0, you actually get, hey, there's a syntax problem here. This is incorrect. So just to show you that a lot of the work that went behind the scenes will now help you find stuff that might have been running or not running, not as you expected, but not giving you any errors or any feedback. Now Ansible is very, very clear with that feedback. This is an example of what you have to do in 1.9 because of lack of inheritance in many cases. You have 3 tasks that you want to run. You don't care that the previous one, because there's certain conditions that can happen, and number 1 can fail, but number 2 can still succeed, number 3 can still succeed, and it's not a big issue that they work or not. And now you have ignore errors that allows you to let the task fail, but not fail the playbook. So you have to go through each task and ignore errors. And the same thing with become. If you had become at the task at the play level, you didn't want these tasks to run with sudo or su. You also have to go to each task and put it in there. So one of the things we did is now play inheritance is much better. So now you can move the ignore errors up here to where the play is. And it gets inherited by all the tasks. With this inheritance, you still, for example, need the become because the play sets it in each one. But here's where blocks come in. And now in the block, you can put a lot of more information, and it'll be common for all those tasks. Now the ignore errors, the var, the remote user, the become setting, now for a bunch of tasks that are different in your play than other tasks, can be set very easily at the block level. And at the play level, you get a lot more directives now. Like ignore errors used to be task only. Now there's very, very few things that are task only. Things like async or with loops are task only. Almost everything else you can set at the play, the block, the role level, and the tasks will inherit that. Strategies are the new plugins, and these hopefully we'll show you new ways to interact with the plays and how the tasks will work. I'm going to describe the linear strategy, which is the default in 2.0, and it's more or less how Ansible used to work. If you had 10 servers and 5 forks, task 1 would run the first 5 servers, then the next 5 servers. Once it's finished with the servers, it would go to task 2, then the first batch of 5, then the next batch of 5, each batch finishing as the slowest server in the batch. So if server 4 takes 40 seconds and everybody else takes 10 seconds, the batch for server that has server 4 will take 30 seconds. And the same thing with task 3, next, and then the play is finished. So this was good in that everything went in lockstep. The bad thing is that each batch or the whole play was going to wait for slow servers. This can be mitigated a bit with the serial, which has a bit of a different interaction. It doesn't make sense to put forks higher than serial or really lower. It makes sense to more or less match it. Serial changes a bit how the play executes, so it'll run the whole play for each batch of servers instead of each task for all servers. So the first task will run for the first 5 servers, the second task for the first 5, the third task for the next 5, and then it will start with the next batch of servers, task 1, task 2, task 3. So this will let the play complete for each batch of servers, but you're still subdivided to a slow server. Again, many things you want to do them in lockstep, and this is why the linear strategy is still there. But we also introduced the free strategy. This strategy is meant to be run the play for each server as you can, as fast as you can, as limited by forks. So we're going to do the same as before, 10 servers, 5 forks. But now things can change very differently. Task 1 finishes for the first 3 servers. Task 2 finishes for server 1 and 2. And task 4 and 5 that are a bit slower for whatever reason are finishing task 1. Now task 3 finishes task 2, and server 1 has already finished the play. It's at task 3. Now task 2, server 4 gets to task 2. Server 5 still hasn't finished. And now server 6, since server 1 finished, is already starting the play. So it starts on task 1. Now, server 7 starts in task 1. Why? Because server 3 just finished also task 3. So that opens up another fork slot. And then you've got the other servers doing the same. And you can see that it can all be interweaved. And as soon as a server finishes, it opens a fork, a new server comes into play, and everything goes as fast as possible. This is good when you have tasks that don't depend that the servers are in sync and that you might want to do as fast as possible. If you have a slow server, like in this case, server 5 is pretty slow, you're not stopping the other servers from running. You're taking a fork slot, but the rest of the fork slots are going through the work faster and running each server as fast as it can. When is this interesting? Well, I made an example of the heartbleed, though I should change this to the drown. The free strategy allows you to update OpenSSH, or in the case of drown, for OpenSSL on all machines. You don't care that one machine does it first or the other, or they go in lockstep. You just want it as fast as possible. You don't want any machines to be waiting on any others. This is one thing where the free strategy excels at. No need to wait for the slow host. So the other big feature of blocks allows for fine-grained error handling, not only inheritance, as I showed you before, but this is an example of what you used to have to do in 1.9. By the way, everything I'm showing you that you had to do in 1.9 still works in 2.0. We're just giving you now the option, if you want to rewrite it, to do it in another way. You used to have to ignore errors for every command and then register the variables and then deal with a recovery command depending on if all those variables had failed or not, or whatever combination. This could lead to very complex playbooks or very complex recovery and a lot of stuff to keep track of. In 2.0, it becomes much simpler. Blocks have a rescue block. If anything in the normal block fails, rescue gets executed. It also has an always, which works like a finally in exception handling, that will run if rescue ran or not, or if the block finished successfully or not. The finally will always run. But this now makes dealing with recovery commands or doing rollbacks much easier. You put the block of commands you want to happen, and if at any point in that block it fails, you can just run the rescue. And now I'm going to show you an example of dynamic includes. This is actually from one of my previous playbooks where I had to deal with a very heterogeneous system. We had all kinds of machines all over the place. And for each set of tasks, I had to include a different file, include file, and have a bunch of when conditions. This got pretty steep, and even handling the default case of, okay, alert me that this is not a machine or something I had. Basically, my default had a fail and a debug. Hey, this machine is not one of the cases you've contemplated. Please create another include. You'll need it here. And in 2.0, it's this easy. You just use the variable directly, put it to lower, it'll match. And using with first found, in case I don't find the distribution one, I'll find the default one. And now I've got all this space in my playbooks. I can rent out, put commercials, put ads, anything, you know. It's made my playbooks very much compressed and a lot easier to deal with. Another thing about dynamic includes is that now you can include and loop over the include itself. Before, you would have to pass a variable with whatever you wanted to loop over, and then have in each command a loop over that same variable. And the way this executes is that the first command executes and does stuff for value 1, then value 2, then value 3. Once it's done, it goes to the next command. It does stuff for value 1, value 2, value 3. And stuff really got interesting once you wanted to nest or do multiple loops on multiple data structures. Again, this still works in 2.0, but we also have a nicer way of doing things. And it also changes a bit of the flow. For example, now I can include with items the stuff I just defined here. And this will run through each one of the commands for each item. So it'll do the first command for item 1, the second command for item 1, the third command for item 1, and then loop over and do the first command for item 2, the second command for item 2. And now for doing nested loops, the only thing you have to do is make sure you capture the item from the include, because the second loop will override the item variable. So if you see here, I'm setting outer item in a set fact to the current item. And then in the next command in which I'm doing the loop, which in the previous slide I was just using with nested, in this slide I'm just telling it, hey, with items, and I've got the outer item, which already came to me, and then the inner item I'm just using normally. And the big difference is that now the list of tasks runs per item versus running each task for all the items. The end result is the same, but the flow is different, which sometimes is significant. And again, you can use both forms in 2.0. Another of the things we added was a meta refresh. This is actually something, if you've interacted with the cloud a lot, you should be familiar with this pattern. In my first task, I just create the VMs. And my second task, I use the add host to create an inventory entry in memory for the VMs and add all the stuff that it needs. And then I have other plays that target that VM. In 2.0, we've got meta refresh inventory. This assumes two things. One, you're using the dynamic inventory for that cloud. For example, here in the example, I'm using DigitalOcean. It could be AWS, it could be Azure, it could be Google. It doesn't matter. If I'm using the dynamic inventory, I can just call refresh inventory, and that will re-execute the dynamic inventory. And any tags, any stuff that I would get to the inventory automatically gets brought back to me. So instead of, like in the previous one, I had to add host and add all the variables myself, if the inventory already took care of that, I don't have to do it anymore. And then the play can then proceed and target the new servers I just created because I just reread them from inventory. It just avoids a lot of typing in the add host and the group by, which you don't normally need if you could re-execute the inventory. The one important thing is that if you've got a cache in your inventory, this will not force a cache refresh. That is something we're looking to work around with, and putting the caches not into the inventory scripts, but into Ansible itself, so we can control it there. Other facts. This is something from another pattern we found when people were delegating things to capture facts to other servers. It became quite hard. For example, if you're updating your DB host to only allow the IP addresses from your web servers, and you were not using a fact cache, you have to do something like you needed to gather facts on the web servers, and then have the play that goes to the DB host. This has the problems that it doesn't work with the limit clause. So if you limit it to DB host 1, the first play, the web servers did not work at all. And if you did stuff like delegate setup would, anything that gathered facts, by default, puts that fact in the inventory host name, not in the delegated host name. So that's a thing that the new directive delegate facts changes. Delegate facts is by default false. So any fact you capture will be to the inventory host name. But if you have delegate to set and delegate facts set to true, the facts you gather will be applied to the delegated host. So in this case, for example, I got rid of the pre-play that just gathered facts on web servers. So I only have the play on DB host, but my first task is a delegated fact gathering, which is what the separate module does, to each web server and delegate facts true. This will populate the facts on each web server. And I have run once true because I don't need to run it for every DB host. I only need to run it once, and each web server will have its facts populated. And now the IP tables command of enabling access to those web servers. And the thing that happens now, if I use limit and go to DB host 1, I'm still going to gather facts on the web servers because the limit only affects the play. It does not affect with items. The one bad thing about this is that setup will run serially. So if you have 3 web servers, it'll run one at a time instead of in parallel. We're looking at changing the loops to be able to parallelize them, which would take that drawback away. So more things that came in 2.0 that I haven't gone into detail. As I said, we're shipping now with a Skippy callback. We've made it a lot easier to activate callbacks we ship with. There's a whitelist configuration that you can just say, whitelist this callback like profile tasks, and now you'll get timing on your tasks. Skippy, you can just set the standard out callback to that, and it'll skip display of any skip tasks. In a whole number of new modules, I put a small example here. IP tables is a new module that a lot of people had asked for. Package, which is basically calls each package manager but abstracts the call, so you don't need to know if it's apt or yum or whatever. You just have one line. You still need to know that the package names are specific to each distro. It won't do package translation. We've added a control for Solaris zones. We've added a Puppet plugin. We've added all kinds of things. The Puppet plugin does something that when I used to use Puppet, I found very annoying, is that once I sent out a manifest, I didn't know when the machine was going to be all green. I would have to go in there, type a for loop in the command line, and run the Puppet disconnected. That's basically what this Puppet plugin does. It'll log on to a Puppet machine and run the agent in a loop until all dependencies are resolved and it comes in green. So it's a nice way of forcing Puppet to be not exactly immediate, but as immediate as it can be. We've added a bunch of lookups and filters. I'd like to mention HashiVault and CredStash. They're alternate places to keep secrets. There's the combine and the extract, which deal with complex dictionaries. New plugin class. We inherited almost every kind of plugin Jinja had, except tests, which made the map and select filters not as powerful because they rely on the tests to be able to do selections and a lot more stuff. But now the tests are basically filters that return true or false, which can now be combined with the other filters that go on complex structures like map and select attribute, reject attribute. They all work with a filter that returns true or false. We've also included WinRM, which is the connection we do to Windows. We've gotten rid of a lot of file size limitations and problems with connections. We've also made it much faster. And Windows is almost at the point that we're going to take the beta tag away and make it a full-fledged supported platform in Ansible. We've added a Docker connection plugin. Right now it's Docker on the machine where you host Ansible. It'll communicate to Docker directly. But we've got a PR right now for 2.1 probably that will allow you to also connect to remote Docker. So now you don't need to run SSH in Docker for Ansible to get into it or play with a change root plugin. Now you can use Docker native API to connect and run and do stuff inside of a container. We've also improved the Vault to handle things from standard in, standard out. You don't only need files to Vault, you can also do multiple files, which is very good for anybody who had to rekey 20 Vault files before you have to go one by one and rekey them. Now you can pass them as a parameter, or if you want to encrypt 20 old vars files and make them vaulted files, now you can do them all in batch. And inventory scripts have now been moved to a contrib directory, which now if you have an RPM or a deb package or most system packages, they will be included. No more going to GitHub and fishing it out of the GitHub repo directly. Now they will be included, and hopefully in newer versions in the future, we will be able to automatically pick up and configure the scripts for you as you ask for them. And there's a lot more things that I just haven't gone through. They're in the changelog and in the porting guides. If you want to take a look at those, everything is linked from docs.ansible.com, and you can see it there. And one other thing that came, that this is actually about 3 days old. The new reformat of the core allowed us to auto document the classes. Now you can see the allowed directives at a play, at a task, at a role. Before, it was really hard to give you this list because it was all over the place. But now it's very easy to generate this list, and I have done just that and published it to the online docs. I just wanted to make a mention of 2.1, which is going to be the next release. We're back to frequent releases. 2.0 was a monumental effort. It took a year, and there were about 6 months without a major release from Ansible. We did 1.9 and up to 1.9.4 in between, but we want to get back on the release often schedule. We've also added a roadmap of what we expect to be in 2.1. These are things that we're pushing for. There's also a lot of things that are already in GitHub as pull requests that are ready to be merged. Those are not all included in the roadmaps. So the roadmap is a set of definite targets we're going to follow, but it's not exclusive of other stuff being in there. Again, we will be updating the changelog. We've been very religious about getting the changelog to reflect what's in the vel, and we're going to continue on that. And for 2.1, we want to bring Windows out of beta and make it a main platform. I've mentioned that before. We're also adding a bunch of networking modules and a framework to support networking modules. And this is very good for the net admins, which I've done a bit of net admin work, and not much. Never gave myself that title. But it was in the Stone Age. People had to go to each machine and update the configuration. Or have scripts to do batch uploads or TFTP. Ansible hopefully is going to bring it into a much nicer way of automating across different products, and also being able to give ops, IT, and NetOps a single source of truth or information. You can have now your network data in the same place, and it's canonical to everybody. You stop the thing that I have it in CVS, I have it in this Excel file, I have it in the Opsware apps. No, now it can be in a single place, and everybody used a single source, which for me was always a huge issue when you had many departments. We're also trying to improve the community process. We've opened a new thing called proposals, where people can submit a proposal to a directory of that name, and then have the community debate over it, polish it, and then once it gets enough approvals, move it to a in process or request for development. And hopefully it'll be a more transparent way of adding new features to Ansible. And of course, many bug fixes. 2.0 introduced a lot of bugs. We fixed, I think, a lot of the major ones with 2.0.1, which was released last week. But there's still a few things that we need to fix or nail down. And hopefully 2.1 will be a very stable release. And I'm out of things that I had listed to talk about. So I'm opening up the floor to questions. Anything you guys want to know?
Can you hear me, Brian?
Yeah, I can hear you.
First of all, thank you for the presentation you made. Actually, I learned a lot of stuff there. And there's one thing, in one server I have, it's not upgrading to Ansible 2.0 because I did a customization to one module that I needed. But after doing that, I say, okay, I'm going to change for 2.0 and I do the customization after. Anyway, I open the floor for questions. Anyone has questions? They're all shy here. You don't see them? Or you can...
Well, to answer, you modified a module that came with Ansible?
Yeah.
So if you put it in the library, it will override the build.
Sorry. Oh yeah, disconnect. Brian, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I don't know if you heard me.
Oh, the the Ansible module that I changed was my company is using Linode, and the way that this module is actually used is very poor. I don't get the functions I want for a naming convention. Even the way that the server is actually named is using characters that they are not standard by the RFC for naming servers. And I made a request for doing the change, but it never happened. So I did the change. We built some pull requests I actually found, and I made as customization. But every time I upgrade Ansible, that thing breaks, and then I don't have the same functionality. So I hard coded those stuff. So I'll handle with that later because I have so many things to do. And then I was like, okay, I hold it the 2.0 because I have that thing that I don't want to lose it. But anyway, I was quite amazed with all the stuff on 2.0 that I'm going to do more. But in my, I don't have questions. I see a hand over there.
How intrusive is the change to 2.0? Sorry, how intrusive is the change to 2.0 syntax-wise? Like, is there any major changes that would break any 1.9 code that we have?
I've shown you a couple of the changes. We're a lot more strict with syntax, so some weird stuff people were doing is breaking. Most of it should be visible in the porting guide. One major breaking change was how we escape things. Before, you used to escape things differently in the key value syntax versus the YAML syntax. Now the escaping is the same, but it breaks the old key value. Some things with interpolating variables used to work in really weird ways in 1.9, completely unexpected. We had never seen a playbook until people started going to 2.0 and saying, hey, this does not work. We just started looking at it and saying, how could that ever work? And the problem was that in 1.9 we had a infinite templating loop that swallowed errors. So sometimes variables were templated about 60 or 70 times, which you will see that templating is much, much, much faster and neater in 2.0. But certain things that worked, that were corner cases, might not work. But any of the published syntax should work. Any of the syntax that you see normally from Ansible itself or in the documentation, that all should continue working. We've deprecated a couple of things that will give you warnings, like using bare variables in with loops, because it's very hard for us to distinguish between an undefined variable and a string when you don't have brackets around it. So that still works. We've just deprecated it and give you a big warning about it. Other things we had fixed, but in 2.0 was swallowing undefined errors. But it seemed that a lot of people were expecting the undefined errors to just skip the task. So we've converted it into a deprecation warning. In 2.01, so it will continue to run, but it will give you a warning that this is not something we ever intended to support, and that an undefined in a with is something that you should not use, and that you cannot use when to skip the with, because the when executes per item. It doesn't execute before and after the with. It executes per item, so inside of the with. So if you have a with an undefined variable, the when cannot shortcut that. It will error out before that. And now we give you a warning about it. 1.9 just happily took the exception and skipped the task, which made people think that the when did work when it didn't. So most things should still work, but you might see warnings for corner cases or stuff that seemed to work but did not really.
Any other questions?
About anything, does not have to be the presentation.
Okay, Brian, I think all from you. Can I have a round of applause for that? That's great. I will send you the link for this. I suppose you probably want to record it. By the way, are the slides available?
I will publish them, yes.
Cool.
Not yet, but I will publish them.
Cool. Oh, that's Slack. Okay. Okay. So sorry. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, because we an error right there.
I don't know. I was. There we go.